Hey guys, tonight we are going to dive into a Greek myth so boring, so utterly devoid of drama, action, or heroism that your brain will immediately decide it's time for a long, deep sleep. We are talking about the time the god Hermes tried to sell a piece of prime, ethereal real estate, the moon. You are here right now on Mount Olympus. Feel the cool marble floor beneath your feet. Not unpleasantly chilly, more like that crisp sheet you love on a warm night. You smell the low, sweet scent of ambrosia and maybe just a hint of ozone from where Zeus is napping nearby. You can see Hermes, the messenger of the gods, leaning against a shimmering column, absent-mindedly polishing his winged sandals. He's supposed to be the god of commerce, travel, Thebes, and insomnia. Wait, that last one is me. But honestly, he looks like a shift supervisor whose only job is handing out scrolls and checking the divine mail. He sighs, a sound like a silk ribbon unfurling. It's a slow day. The paperwork is endless, but the excitement is zero. He just delivered a new sandal contract to Hephaestus. Seriously, the paperwork involved in divine footwear procurement is intense. And now he's got nothing but time. You see him tapping his foot, tap, 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 a rhythm that is getting subtly faster. His mind, you realize, is the most active part of the pantheon, always looking for an angle, a shortcut, a way to make a little extra drachma on the side. This is the guy who invented wrestling, after all, a truly revolutionary business model involving betting on grappling, and now he's reduced to divine middle management. You see the frustration building, not in a loud, scary way, but in a quiet, simmering energy that makes you want to close your eyes just to absorb the sheer lack of drama. You watch him flick through his list of tasks on a glowing papyrus tablet. Deliver cloud maintenance schedule, check on that minor flood in Thessaly, warn mortals about eating too much fig jam. He snaps the tablet shut. He needs a project, something with scale, something that no one else has thought of. He needs a side hustle so big it makes his standard divine duties look like a lemonade stand. And what is the biggest, shiniest, most conspicuous object visible to everyone, always there, yet completely untaxed and uncommercialized? Historians still argue whether the ancient Greeks viewed Hermes primarily as a trickster or a patron of travelers, but watching him now, he seems like a bored intern who just wants to disrupt the celestial economy. You probably won't survive this myth before you drift off because the sheer weight of divine boredom is a surprisingly effective sedative. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I invite you to post your location and local time and let us all know where in the world you are settling in for this long, slow drift to sleep. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You see him now, scanning the vast, starry expanse outside Olympus's shimmering walls, and his eye catches the silver disk floating serenely above the Aegean Sea. That's a lot of perfectly good, unmonetized light, isn't it? He takes a slow walk across the Hall of the Gods. Every step is an echo of the eternal, divine routine. You follow him, or rather you drift along with his perspective. He's walking past the massive golden clock that somehow tells time across all dimensions, yet is perpetually stuck at 3 a.m. It's just another detail of the bureaucratic perfection that drives him mad. He mutters about the lack of innovation on Olympus. Everyone is too busy being majestic or vengeful or turning mortals into cows. No one is thinking about passive income. You see a faint, mischievous smirk curl his lip. This is the quirky tidbit you need to know. The city of Athens famously had no statue of Hermes until long after it had statues of other Olympians, which some fringe scholars suggest was because they couldn't agree whether he deserved a shrine for cleverness or a jail cell for petty theft. That inherent ambiguity is his power. He's the ultimate gray area, and right now, he's planning an all-gray scheme. He stops at a massive, ornate map of the mortal world. You notice he has a tiny, almost invisible satchel of holding slung across his shoulder, far smaller than you'd expect for a messenger god. That satchel, legend has it, can hold anything from a thunderbolt to a very, very long receipt. He pulls out a piece of chalk, not just any chalk, but chalk made from crystallized starlight, which apparently is excellent for divine brainstorming. He circles the moon on the celestial plane of the map. He draws arrows pointing to it and arrows pointing away. He's performing a divine SWOT analysis on a heavenly body. He starts listing the attributes of the moon, whispering the words like a realtor discussing a beachfront property. Universal appeal, check. Consistent visibility, check. No current owner claiming title on this exact orbital plane? Surprisingly, check. It's just there. He's genuinely surprised no one has monetized it yet. It's the biggest missed opportunity since Prometheus invented fire and forgot to patent the matchstick. He sits down on a step, cross-legged, the image of a bored genius waiting for the bus. You feel a wave of intense, hypnotic calm just watching him think. The sheer scale of the cosmos is irrelevant to Hermes. For him, it's just a market that needs cornering. One mainstream historical fact about Hermes you might find sleepily interesting is that in ancient Greece, his statues, called Hermes, were often placed at crossroads and boundaries, not just to protect travelers, but to mark the transition from one territory or one idea to another. He is the liminal god, the boundary crosser, and now he's about to cross the boundary of what can actually be sold. He pulls out a tiny abacus made of polished obsidian. He begins to calculate the potential revenue. How many mortals gaze at the moon nightly? How much would they pay for a guaranteed perfect reflection on their local pond? What about the divinities? Minor gods love status symbols. Owning a tiny documented fraction of the moon's luminosity, that's not just status, that's a power move. He leans in closer to the map, and you lean in too, not out of interest, but because his quiet focus is utterly mesmerizing. If I were to sell moon viewing rights for, say, 5 copper coins per mortal lifetime, amortized over 20,000 mortals in the prime viewing area, plus bulk rates for Cyclops who need better light for their nighttime pottery, the numbers are dizzying, but you only catch the low hum of his voice, which sounds like someone gently stirring honey. He needs a test case. He needs to transition from the theoretical celestial real estate market to the actual messy divine commerce of Olympus. He carefully puts his starlight chalk away. He stands up, stretching slowly, and you feel the moment of decision click into place like the tumbler of a divine lock. He is no longer the tired postman. He is the original, cunning entrepreneur. His eyes, usually twinkling with low-level mischief, now have the steely, unfocused gaze of a venture capitalist who just found the next unicorn startup, the moon. It's beautiful, it's consistent, and best of all, the primary producer, Selena, the moon goddess, is notoriously chill. He's decided. This is the plan. Step 1, find a buyer. Step 2, sell the light. The whole operation is so audacious and yet so administratively complex that it's the perfect subject for a long, dull narration. He adjusts his patassos, the winged traveler's cap, which gives off a barely perceptible, soporific glow. He's ready to pitch his idea. But who to pitch it to first? Not a mortal, that's too small time. Not a major god, too much scrutiny. He needs someone minor, someone who feels overlooked, someone who needs a status symbol to help them feel like they matter in the huge, chaotic, immortal hierarchy. He exits the Hall of the Gods, heading towards the quieter, less majestic wing of Olympus, where the minor gods and perpetually complaining nymphs reside. That's where the real market research happens. He's looking for the celestial equivalent of the water cooler, where someone will inevitably be complaining about their divine mortgage. And as he turns the corner, gliding on his winged sandals, you realize the first stage of the heist is complete. Hermes has convinced himself that the moon is a valid, transferable asset. The rest is just paperwork.
You follow Hermes, or rather you are gently pulled along in his invisible slipstream as he drifts past the main Olympian thoroughfares and into the slightly dingier, but far more gossipy, side avenues. This is the celestial real estate market, not of majestic temples, but of humble, by divine standards, cloud cottages and minor constellation leases. It's the suburbs of Olympus, where the air smells slightly less of pure gold and slightly more of damp marble. Hermes is listening, his acute divine ears tuned for the telltale sounds of financial distress. He needs a complaint to validate his plan. And sure enough, around a corner, near the water fountain dedicated to the minor river god Peneus, he finds it. Two minor goddesses are talking. One, Eos, goddess of the dawn, a perpetually early riser, you might know her, is looking genuinely frustrated. The other, Iris, goddess of the rainbow, famous for her excellent aerial commute, is trying to console her. You hear Eos's voice, not loud, but strained with the particular whine of someone trapped in a bad housing deal. "I just don't know how I'm going to manage it, Iris," Eos sighs, pulling at her rose-colored robe. "The price of prime eastern-facing cloud frontage is insane. Everything close to the sun's path is hyperinflated. I keep telling the celestial brokers I don't need that much light. I only need enough space to spread my colors before Apollo takes over, but they insist on bundling the light rights." Iris, looking impeccably styled, despite having just flown across a continental storm, nods sympathetically. "Tell me about it. My landlord is charging extra for ambient chromatic refraction fees. It's daylight robbery. I swear, they treat light like it's a scarce resource, but we're surrounded by the stuff." And there it is, the key word, light, a scarce resource. Hermes' ears perk up. He stops polishing his sandals entirely. He realizes that the core commodity of the cosmos, illumination, is already being packaged and sold at exorbitant rates on a fractional basis. The market isn't for space, it's for viewing experience. This taps into a genuine economic truth even here in the land of the deathless. Scarcity is relative. If everyone has unlimited gold, then scarcity shifts to something intangible, like visibility, access, or unique aesthetic experience. Hermes, the god of commerce, recognizes a market inefficiency when he hears one. If sunlight is selling at a premium because it's bright and hot, then moonlight, which is soft, cool, and arguably more romantic, a key demographic, must be worth something. He leans back against the wall, pretending to examine a faded fresco of an extremely boring fishing scene. He's taking mental notes. Eos needs light that isn't connected to Apollo's wildly expensive high-intensity package. She needs a budget illumination option. She needs the moon. You realize this idea, this whole setup, is deeply connected to a quirky tidbit about ancient Greek life, the concept of oikos. This wasn't just your house, it was the entire economic unit of your family, including your land, slaves, and property. The oikos was sacred and fiercely protected. Hermes is now applying the logic of the oikos, the need for ownership and control, to the giant celestial sphere. He's translating the desire for a nice backyard in Athens into the desire for a small slice of the night sky. One mainstream historical fact about ancient Greece relevant here is that Athenian commercial law, which Hermes would naturally oversee, was surprisingly advanced, dealing with complex concepts like maritime loans, botany, and fractional ownership of ships, often recorded on stone tablets displayed publicly. If you can sell a 1/16th share of a trireme currently crossing the treacherous Hellespont, surely you can sell a 1/16th share of the moon currently crossing the temperate sky. The risk assessment is arguably lower. The moon is less likely to sink. He walks away slowly, the conversation between Eos and Iris a gentle, hypnotic hum fading behind you. He's no longer looking at the moon as a mere sphere. He's seeing a massive, untapped asset pool. He finds a quiet terrace overlooking the mortal city of Corinth, where the night air is cool and still. He sits down cross-legged and pulls out his tiny obsidian abacus, the one you saw him with in the last section, remember? He starts running the numbers again, but this time he's factoring in the demand side he just witnessed. Product: reflected lunar light and guaranteed night visibility. Target demographic: minor gods, status seekers, mortals, romantics or farmers, and underworld figures, low light optimization. Unique selling proposition, USP. It's not sunlight. It's cooler, quieter, and non-taxable. For now. He's mentally composing the sales brochure. He knows he needs to make the abstract concept of owning moonlight sound tangible. He thinks of the moon as the ultimate celestial nightlight. Historians still argue whether Hermes' role as the god of boundaries extended to moral boundaries. Was he a champion of fair trade or just a cosmic opportunist? Watching him now, it's clear he's firmly in the latter camp. He's not thinking about the ethics of selling a public good. He's thinking about the logistics of delivery, which, for a god of travel, is usually the easiest part. But how do you deliver a moonbeam? He chuckles softly. This is the light joke for this segment. If I sell the moon, I'm going to need to invent a new unit of measurement. Maybe a lunar lumen? No, too technical. How about a selenic shimmer? That sounds expensive. He needs to quantify the product. He starts by calculating the moon's circumference, surprisingly easy for a god who can travel around it in a blink. Then its total reflective surface area, and then attempt to assign a price per square kilometer of albedo. This level of divine accounting is so dry, so intensely focused on administrative detail that your eyelids feel heavy just witnessing the effort. He spends what feels like an eternity, or maybe just 3 minutes in mortal time. It's hard to tell on Olympus, meticulously dividing the moon into 16 celestial shares. He decides 16 is a good, solid, divisible number. Like a good financial market, the number of shares must create a sense of artificial scarcity. Share 1, the Sea of Tranquility viewing package, guaranteed calm nights. He murmurs, ticking off a point on his glowing tablet. Share 4, the Lunar South Pole Crater Zone, excellent for philosophers who like deep contemplation. The core idea is forming. He's not selling the moon itself, but certificates of perpetual viewing rights and aesthetic dividends. A complex financial instrument designed to extract capital purely on perceived status and a vague, non-enforceable claim to celestial beauty. It's the ultimate divine Ponzi scheme, but done with impeccable, almost soporific professionalism. He finally stands up, satisfied. His energy is renewed not by physical rest, but by the thrill of a massive, morally flexible business venture. He pulls his cap down slightly. The moon itself shines down, completely unaware of the intricate, high-level financial fraud being plotted in its name. Its soft, unwavering light is the perfect, boring background to a perfect, boring scam.
The idea, now fully formed in Hermes's mind, begins to take on the texture of reality, and you are right there, watching the divine gears turn. You are witnessing moonlight as a commodity, the moment when pure celestial reflection is translated into a price-per-share model. Hermes leaves the side avenues of Olympus and retreats to a small, private pavilion, one dedicated to the concept of efficient transaction flow. It's a quiet place, filled with the faint, rhythmic scratching of unseen scribes, updating cosmic ledgers. The air here smells faintly of parchment and profitable interest rates. He pulls out a large, heavy tablet, not the glowing papyrus messenger device, but a solid slab of celestial bronze, perfect for complex calculations. He runs his slender fingers over the tablet, the surface lighting up with glowing silver numerals. This is where he conceptualizes the moon itself, Selene's beautiful, silent chariot, as a marketable asset. He notes its universal appeal. Every mortal, from the nomadic Scythians to the seafaring Phoenicians, looks up at it. He notes its consistent presence, barring the occasional, easily explained eclipse, which he decides to classify as a scheduled maintenance downtime. It's always there. This reliability is a huge selling point, unlike Zeus's attention span, which is notoriously volatile. He starts running models based on historical trade values. If the price of gold is tied to the stability of the mortal economy, and the price of ambrosia is tied to the longevity of the Olympians, then the price of the moon must be tied to human romantic despair and navigation needs. He estimates the market value based on the total number of ships guided safely across the sea per year, plus a bonus factor for the sheer volume of mediocre poetry inspired by its glow. He realizes the true genius of the product. You don't have to deliver it. It's a subscription service, he whispers to himself, his voice soft, almost like the sound of sand pouring through an hourglass. It's a perpetual viewing license. This is the subtle, sleepy revelation that underpins the whole scam. He's not selling matter, he's selling access. You might find this quirky tidbit interesting. In some remote, mountainous regions of Arcadia, it was believed that the moon was a giant silver shield carried by a forgotten titan, not a goddess's chariot, meaning its value was purely based on the metallurgical quality of the silver. Hermes dismisses this regional variation with a wave of his hand. It's irrelevant. The universal perception of its light is what matters. He formalizes the moon into 16 shares again, but this time he gives them official-sounding, boring names designed to appeal to investors. Share 1, the waxing gibbous visibility pool, high growth potential. Share 8, the full moon zenith viewing rights, premium tier. Share 16, the waning crescent residual luminescence portfolio, low risk, high utility. He's careful to specify that ownership is only of the reflected light and the associated terrestrial aesthetic benefits, explicitly excluding ownership of the physical moon rock,
the goddess Selene's chariot, or any potential lunar cheese reserves. This is excellent due diligence for a divine con artist. This is the light joke for this segment. If I sold the actual rock, Hermes muses, tapping the bronze tablet, I'd have to deal with shipping, and trust me, customs forms for celestial bodies are a nightmare. They always ask if it contains live or flammable titans. It's simpler this way. He thinks about the legal framework. Historians still argue whether Greek law actually allowed for the concept of air rights or sky ownership before the Roman period. But Hermes, being the god of law and contracts, decides to simply invent the necessary legal precedent. He scribbles a dense paragraph in microscopic divine script on the bronze tablet, establishing the Hermetic doctrine of incorporeal celestial asset fractionalization. It sounds incredibly complicated, and therefore utterly legitimate. One mainstream historical fact that grounds this scheme is the importance of the agora in ancient Athens. The agora was the marketplace, but it was also the political and judicial center. Commerce and law were inseparable. Hermes, in inventing this scheme, is effectively setting up a new, purely celestial agora, an unregulated market where he is the sole broker and rule-maker. He needs to test the pitch. He needs to move from theoretical price modeling to actual, messy, mortal persuasion. He needs to see if the vague, beautiful promise of ownership of reflected light can actually separate someone from their coin. He looks at the bronze tablet one last time, admiring the detailed risk assessment he's included. Risk factor: the unpredictable nature of Olympian regulatory oversight, specifically Zeus waking up. He assigns this a low to moderate risk rating, betting on Zeus's consistently heavy napping schedule. He puts the tablet away in his satchel of holding. It's time for a field test. He needs a mortal mind, uncomplicated by divine understanding, but susceptible to grand promises. This practice run will fine-tune the language, test the ambiguity of the contract, and confirm the general gullibility of the target market. He adjusts his winged sandals. You feel the air pressure subtly change as he prepares for a rapid descent. He's looking for someone simple, pastoral, and awake at an inconvenient hour. A shepherd. Shepherds are perfect. They are familiar with the moon, they deal with livestock, which represents collateral, and they are notoriously easy to bore into submission. He aims for the rolling hills of the Peloponnese, where the night sky is vast and the air is thick with the scent of time and unsuspecting targets. The moon hangs in the sky, placid, indifferent, and now, officially, for sale.
The wind hums past your ears as you descend with Hermes, the soft flicker of his winged sandals creating a gentle, rhythmic sound that is instantly soporific. You leave the ethereal silence of Olympus for the actual, mundane noise of the mortal world, the distant bleating of sheep, the chirping of crickets, and the occasional, deeply satisfying snore of a sleeping farmer. This is the earthly test run. Hermes alights silently on a low hill in the Peloponnese. Below him, tending a small, nervous flock, is a shepherd named Thyrsis. Thyrsis is a perfect test subject. He is simple, he is bored, and he is deeply dependent on the sky for his livelihood. He looks up at the moon constantly, using its slow transit to estimate the hours until dawn. He's exactly the kind of person who would appreciate the value of the moon, but not the impossibility of owning it. Hermes approaches, gliding rather than walking. His voice, usually a lively tenor, drops to a conspiratorial, almost whispered baritone, perfectly suited for an ASMR-style sales pitch. "Good evening, Thyrsis," Hermes says, his voice like rustling silk. Thyrsis jumps, dropping the staff he'd been whittling. "By the gods! Who are you?" "Just a traveler," Hermes replies, leaning on his staff, which is actually a kerykeion, or herald's rod, but he makes it look like a casual walking stick. "A traveling consultant. I noticed you gazing at the moon. Beautiful, isn't she?" You watch as Hermes smoothly launches into the sales script he'd been mentally composing. He doesn't mention gods or ownership at first, only guaranteed benefits. "Thyrsis, how much better would your sheep-raising be if you had guaranteed optimal nocturnal illumination? Think of the time you spend fumbling in the dark, the potential losses. What if I could offer you, for a very modest fee, a certificate of preferred viewing for that exact portion of the moon directly above your pasture? It's an investment in security and productivity." He's exaggerating the moon's supposed benefits with the enthusiasm of a modern salesman pushing a low-quality mattress. He suggests the moonlight will not only deter wolves, because wolves prefer shadow, obviously, but also subtly enhance the growth of the fleece. This is the light joke for this segment. Plus, he pulls a tiny scroll from his satchel. "The certificate grants you access to our exclusive moonbeam polishing service." It doesn't exist, but it sounds official, doesn't it? Thyrsis just nods slowly, utterly confused, but mesmerized by the sheer complexity of the offer. Hermes brings up a quirky tidbit designed to create FOMO, or fear of missing out. "You know, the king of Egypt is considering a bulk purchase of the waxing gibbous visibility pool to illuminate the entire Nile Delta. If he buys, the prices on individual certificates will simply skyrocket. This is a pre-IPO celestial offering." Thyrsis has no idea what an IPO is, but the words King of Egypt and skyrocket sound important. Thyrsis finally finds his voice. "Sir, with respect, I barely have enough coppers to buy a new cloak. And it's the moon. It's just there. It belongs to everyone." Hermes smiles gently. "Ah, Thyrsis, that is exactly the old-world thinking we are disrupting. We're not selling the moon. We are selling certainty of access and aesthetic quality. Think of it as reserving a subscription to the best possible view. It's like paying for a front-row seat when everyone else is stuck in the cheap seats of general darkness." He manages to make the night sky sound like a poorly run amphitheater. He pulls out a beautifully, if confusingly, inscribed copper plate, a prototype of the Moon Ownership Certificate. It's covered with minute, looping script that outlines the hermetic doctrine of incorporeal celestial asset fractionalization you heard about earlier. The sheer amount of boring fine print is enough to make anyone sleepy. One mainstream historical fact that Hermes is unconsciously exploiting is the ancient Greek concept of eurygetism, or doing good deeds. Often, wealthy citizens would pay for public goods, like building a fountain or lighting a path, to gain social status. Hermes frames this purchase not just as ownership, but as a contribution to maintaining the operational integrity of the greater celestial sphere. Thyrsis is being invited to be a celestial Euergetes on a budget. "Look, I'll give you the entry-level package, the single full moon viewing right, valid for the next 12 cycles. For just 3 copper coins, you get the peace of mind knowing your light is secured, not simply loaned by the whim of the cosmos." Thyrsis looks at the plate, then up at the moon, then back at the plate. He is utterly overwhelmed by the concept of paying for something he already receives, but the complexity of the contract and the smooth cadence of Hermes' voice have created a cognitive fog. He reaches into his pouch and hesitantly pulls out 3 coppers. You watch as Hermes takes the coins, his movements fluid and quick. He hands Thyrsis the ornate copper plate, which is now worth exactly nothing. The mortal has been successfully scammed, and the market research is complete. Historians still argue whether the early Greek trading centers viewed the market price of a good as an objective value or simply the result of persuasive rhetoric and perceived necessity. For Hermes, the answer is clearly the latter. The value of the moon is whatever he can convince people to pay. Hermes gives the shepherd a brisk, polite nod. Enjoy your superior illumination, Thyrsis, and remember to check the fine print for the lunar tax reciprocity clause next time. He winks, a tiny sparkle of mischief that you barely catch. He ascends quickly, the coppers already deposited in his satchel of holding. The air cools slightly as he rises, and the sound of the crickets returns to normal volume. The test was a success. The next step is scaling up, pitching the idea to the one person who actually owns the light.
You ascend rapidly with Hermes, the soft, rhythmic whirring of his wing sandals fading the sound of the mortal world back into a distant hum. The scent of pine and sheep fleece is quickly replaced by the chill, clean air of the upper atmosphere. The mortal test was successful. The proof of concept is validated by 3 copper coins. Now, Hermes must confront the biggest potential hurdle: Selene, the goddess of the moon, and the actual source of the product. This is a sales pitch to Selene. You find yourself hovering next to Hermes as he approaches the moon itself. It's not a distant disk anymore. It's vast, silent, and incredibly cold. The surface is dusty, silvery gray, and utterly immense, moving with the majestic, slow-motion grace of a truly massive object. Selene's chariot, pulled by 2 magnificent, sleepy white horses, Phoebe and Eos, you assume, based on their dull, moonlit glow, is just starting its nightly circuit. Selene herself looks exactly how you'd expect a goddess who works the graveyard shift to look: perpetually tired, draped in robes the color of chilled milk, and completely focused on the routine. Her expression is one of serene, almost somnambulant boredom. She's been doing this same loop for millennia. She is the epitome of reliable but unexciting cosmic infrastructure. Hermes, the master of charm, slows his approach. He lands lightly on the moon dust near her chariot, kicking up a tiny ethereal plume of silvery grit. "Selene, my dear, you look marvelous tonight," Hermes greets her, his voice perfectly pitched between respectful admiration and casual friendliness. Selene turns her head slowly, her eyes, usually gleaming silver crescents, looking a little bloodshot. "Hermes, what is it? Do you have another scroll from Zeus demanding I adjust my tidal pull by precisely 0.003 degrees? Because I'm already behind schedule." Her voice is soft, a whisper that seems to travel through space itself. It is, frankly, very hard to stay awake listening to her. Hermes waves a dismissive hand. "Nonsense. No paperwork tonight, sister. I'm here with an opportunity, a way to revolutionize your role, elevate your status, and introduce a crucial new revenue stream for the celestial economy." He pulls out the bronze tablet, its glowing numerals reflecting sharply in the moonlight. He lays out his scheme, presenting it not as a theft of her authority, but as a revolutionary franchising opportunity for the cosmos. Think of this, Selene. You are providing a necessary, high-quality, non-polluting product, reflected ambient night light. But you, the CEO of Lunar Illumination, are not getting paid for it. It's an untapped market of trillions of drachmas. He points to the detailed breakdown of the 16 celestial shares he drafted earlier. Remember the waxing gibbous visibility pool? He assures her he isn't selling the moon itself, only the rights to its viewing experience and the predictability of its luminescence. He spins it as a premium access model. "You continue your work just as beautifully as always," Hermes says, walking around her chariot and patting one of the enormous placid white horses, Phoebe. "But now you receive a commission on every certificate of perpetual viewing sold. It takes no extra work, no extra movement. It's pure, passive income based on the inherent beauty you already produce." You notice a quirky tidbit in the background. One of Celine's horses, Phoebe, is attempting to nibble on the edge of the moon dust, which looks surprisingly like extremely fine powdered sugar. This small domestic detail in the vastness of space only contributes to the boring, sleepy atmosphere. Celine listens, tilting her head. She processes information slowly, weighted down by the sheer effort of keeping the night moving. You can see her internal monologue, which probably goes something like, "Does this involve me having to deal with people? No. Does this require me to change my orbit? No. Will it annoy Apollo? Probably. So you want to take care of the administration and monetization of my output?" she asks, her voice a low, smooth sound, like water running over very smooth pebbles. Precisely. I handle the complex, boring parts, the Hermetic doctrine of incorporeal celestial asset fractionalization, and you collect a royalty. We make the moon not just a beautiful spectacle, but a crucial financial instrument. He's talking about massive cosmic fraud, but his tone is so gentle and administrative that it sounds like he's explaining a retirement plan. This is the light joke for this section. Hermes, pointing to the vast, desolate lunar surface, adds, "Plus, the certificate holders get a 10% discount on any future colonization project. Though frankly, the Wi-Fi coverage up here is terrible." Celine manages a tiny, ethereal half-smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. One mainstream historical fact that makes this pitch so effective is that in ancient Greek mythology, the gods often had clearly defined, overlapping domains, leading to endless squabbles over jurisdiction, like Poseidon and Athena arguing over Athens. By offering Celine a financial stake while keeping the physical asset, the moon, under her operational control, Hermes cleverly bypasses the need for a protracted, bureaucratic fight over territory. He's offering her a settlement before a dispute has even begun. Historians still argue whether Celine truly understood the implications of Hermes' advanced, abstract financial schemes. Did she realize he was selling something that was inherently free and unownable? Or did she simply appreciate the reduction of her mental burden? Judging by her weary expression, she just seems grateful that someone else is handling the bookkeeping. He concludes the pitch by offering her a single, beautifully crafted golden drachma, paid up front as a signing bonus. This coin, he explains, represents the first payment on the inevitable bounty. He doesn't tell her it was the payment he scammed from poor Thyrsis the shepherd. Celine takes the coin, looking at it with mild curiosity. It glints sharply in her own light. The sheer monotony of her routine, pulling the moon across the sky every single night, has left her vulnerable to any distraction, especially one that promises complexity without responsibility. She gives Hermes a slow, heavy nod. "Handle the details, Hermes. Just don't mess with the tides." Poseidon gets very grumpy. Permission granted. The product is secured. Hermes, ecstatic, but maintaining a calm, businesslike demeanor, bows slightly, the winged sandals giving off a soft, sleep-inducing hum. He has just secured the rights to sell a celestial body using a single copper coin disguised as a golden one. The largest, most boring celestial fraud in history is officially underway. Hermes has secured the product. You watch him float away from the silent, massive disk of the moon, leaving Celine and her perpetually weary horses to their rhythmic patrol. This moment, Celine's curious indifference, is the quiet, crucial pivot point of the entire scheme. Celine, perpetually tired from her nightly drive, accepted Hermes' proposal with an indifferent, ethereal yawn. You saw it, a vast, silent intake of breath that seemed to pull at the very fabric of space. She seems genuinely unaware, or perhaps entirely unconcerned about the implications of selling off her light. For her, the moon is a job, a duty, a massive shining burden. The concept of selling off its aesthetic value is as meaningless to her as selling the oxygen in the sky. It doesn't impact her operational goals. She nudges Phoebe, the white horse, who responds with a gentle, ringing snort that sounds like a tiny bell in the vacuum of space.
Selene is an excellent example of divine detachment. Her entire focus is on the kinetic process of the night sky, not the financial potential of her light. She understands that she has to drive the moon, and that's about it. The concept of passive income is a modern anxiety that simply doesn't compute in her ancient, tireless brain. Hermes, meanwhile, is practically vibrating with quiet entrepreneurial energy. He understands that Selene's apathy is his single greatest asset. He's not stealing, he's simply monetizing her ennui.
The stage is now set for the next phase, the Olympian marketing campaign. You follow Hermes back into the bustling heart of Olympus, where the air is now subtly charged with excitement, like the day before a huge holiday festival. This buzz isn't about war or feasting, it's about finance, which to some gods is far more thrilling. The RA, those 50 nimble nymphs of the air, are proving to be marketing geniuses. Their method is simple, but highly effective. The soft, continuous whisper. They don't shout. They merely ensure that everywhere a mid-level god or a wealthy demigod happens to be, at the ambrosia bar, near the prophetic oracle's office, or even just taking a quiet stroll, they hear the phrase, "Did you hear about the limited edition moon ownership certificate sale?" You can almost hear the soft, lulling sound of their gossip, a constant shh that is utterly mesmerizing and incredibly hard to ignore. They are successfully creating an artificial sense of scarcity and urgency. Hermes has hired them to spread rumors that only 16 original shares were issued, and that Share 8, the full moon zenith viewing rights, is already attracting bids from a very, very serious earthly king. He's referring to poor, confused Thyrsus the shepherd, of course, but the RA don't need to know that. The psychology here is fascinating, even for the deathless. Gods, despite their power, are obsessed with status symbols. Owning a piece of the moon, an object of universal devotion and beauty, is the ultimate flex. It suggests access, foresight, and high-level patronage from Hermes himself. This is the light joke for this segment. One of the RA whispers to a lesser god who manages the seasonal rainfall. "I heard Ares tried to buy in bulk, but Hermes rejected him, said his investment portfolio wasn't aesthetically aligned. It's very exclusive." This naturally makes the lesser god desperate to buy in. Hermes sits quietly in a luxurious gold-plated booth in the Olympian Cafe, sipping a latte made with goat's milk and celestial foam. He doesn't need to sell, he just needs to be seen being selective. He pulls out a ledger of orders, which is filling rapidly with names of minor deities who govern things like the quality of morning dew or the migration patterns of swallows. They are trading in their hard-earned celestial favors and gold for unseen, intangible rights. You realize this is a beautiful illustration of a quirky tidbit of Greek culture, the pervasive belief in Moira, or fate or portion. Every god and mortal has their allotted portion of fate, but Hermes is effectively selling them a small, non-existent extra portion of the cosmos, making them feel like they've cheated their original Moira. One mainstream historical fact that makes this campaign resonate is the actual historical function of temple treasuries in ancient Greece. Temples, especially those dedicated to gods like Apollo and Zeus, often functioned as central banks, storing wealth, making loans, and acting as secure repositories for private funds. By operating his scam out of Olympus, the ultimate temple, Hermes gives the moon certificate the implicit financial authority of the entire pantheon. The language of the sale is key. Hermes ensures his agents never use the word sale or ownership.
They use terms like securing a perpetual view, appeals to the romantic, acquiring aesthetic dividends, appeals to the intellectual, investment in celestial stability, appeals to the nervous. Historians still argue whether the proliferation of minor cults and deities in the Hellenistic period was purely religious or partly driven by the desire for local economic control. Hermes, by empowering these lesser gods with a celestial asset, is catering directly to their need for both status and perceived financial autonomy. The campaign reaches a fever pitch when the Hesperides, nymphs famous for guarding Hera's golden apples, show up. They want to buy 2 shares. If the keepers of the gold standard are investing, everyone else figures they must be late to the party. The market is officially in a bubble. Hermes calmly takes their payment, offering them the beautifully printed, utterly meaningless certificates. He maintains his relaxed, sleepy ASMR cadence throughout the transaction, treating the exchange of immense wealth for literally nothing with the same mild interest as sorting mail. His calm demeanor only reinforces the buyer's confidence. If the seller isn't desperate, the product must be valuable. He pauses, leaning back in his chair. He knows he has to expand the market again. The money pouring in from minor deities is good, but for true scale, he needs to tap the big, quiet money, the untouchable capital that resides where no one else dares to go. He needs to penetrate the one realm that cares deeply about illumination, or lack thereof. He needs to talk to the one God who truly understands the value of scarce light. He needs to visit his uncle, Hades. The hum of the Ore's whispers continues, a soothing, continuous drone that is simultaneously driving up the price of nothing and lulling you deeper into sleep. The scam is expanding, and the ultimate test of its legitimacy lies beneath the earth.
The intoxicating rush of the Olympian marketing campaign is over, and now you accompany Hermes on a much slower, quieter journey. He leaves the bright, bustling upper world and descends into the silent, solemn depths. This is where he seeks out the ultimate high-value, low-illumination customer. Hades expresses mild interest. The descent into the underworld is a study in sensory deprivation. The vibrant colors of Olympus bleed away, replaced by the gray-on-gray aesthetic of the realm of the dead. The only sound is the dull, mesmerizing slosh of the river Styx and the monotonous clank-clank-clank of Charon's ferry pole hitting the shoreline, a sound that, strangely, is very soothing. Hermes finds his uncle, Hades, seated upon his obsidian throne next to the eternally composed Persephone. The air here is heavy, thick with silence, and barely lit by flickering, heatless embers. Hades, the god of the dead and wealth, a relevant title as he owns all the riches beneath the earth, looks up slowly, his expression one of eternal, mild annoyance. "Hermes," Hades greets him, his voice low and rumbling like distant subterranean movement. "You are early for the delivery of the annual registration forms for the recently deceased. Is this an unscheduled visit?" "A purely commercial visit, uncle," Hermes replies, keeping his voice respectful yet infused with a subtle, professional excitement. He knows he can't oversell here. Hades hates melodrama. He needs to frame the moon certificate as a practical solution to an administrative problem. "I've come to offer you a portion of the moon's reflective property," Hermes says, pulling out a certificate designated Share 4, the Lunar South Pole Crater Zone. Think of it as low-light optimization. Hades looks at the certificate, which faintly glows in the dim light. "Optimization of what, exactly? Our shadows? We have plenty of those." Hermes launches into the pitch. The moon's light, though indirect and minimal, represents consistent, predictable illumination. In the underworld, where light is the ultimate scarce resource, even a tiny, predictable fraction holds immense value. Imagine, uncle, a guaranteed, faint lunar illumination over the asphodel meadows, just enough light for the shades to navigate the bureaucracy of the afterlife slightly more efficiently. It's an investment in operational efficiency. He argues that a slight brightening of the gloom could actually speed up the processing of souls, improving the overall mood slightly, and maybe making the bookkeeping easier for Hades' stuff. This is the light jog for this segment. Plus, Hermes adds, leaning closer, it's a great talking point for Persephone's spring visit. Oh, you like the new faint glow. That's my partial ownership of the full moon visibility pool. Status, uncle. Persephone, who is listening with detached interest, raises a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Hades taps his fingers on the armrest of his throne. He is interested, not in the light itself, but in the scarcity and control the certificate represents. If Hermes is selling it, it must be valuable. And Hades likes owning things that are universally desirable. He is the ultimate, quiet collector. This leads us to a quirky tidbit about the underworld's economy. The ferryman, Charon, traditionally required payment, the obol, to ferry the dead across the Styx. This tiny required transaction made Charon one of the most reliable and consistent earners in the cosmos. Hades understands that a universal, guaranteed revenue stream based on a cosmic resource, like moonlight, is the foundation of true, eternal wealth. One mainstream historical fact that makes Hades' interest logical is that in the ancient world, many powerful families derived their wealth not just from land, but from mining, especially silver and lead, which was inherently subterranean. Hades, as the ultimate owner of the chthonic, underworld, resources, is naturally inclined to invest in assets tied to the celestial body that governs those earthly cycles, the moon. "What is the cost?" Hades finally asks, his voice cutting through the silence. Hermes, knowing he has to aim high, names a price. A single flawless ingot of electrum, mined from the deepest veins, representing the full value of the lunar South Pole crater zone's consistent reflection. Hades considers this. Electrum, an alloy of gold and silver, is scarce and precious, but Hermes has made the investment sound like a necessary, low-maintenance update to the underworld's infrastructure. Historians still argue whether the Greek concept of Plutos, wealth, was fundamentally tied to the productivity of the land or the static accumulation of precious metals. Hades, being associated with both, sees the moon certificate as bridging these two sources of value. It governs the surface world, but the payment is drawn from the static, subterranean wealth he controls. Hades nods once, imperceptibly. He snaps his fingers. A massive, dull-glowing ingot of electrum materializes instantly next to his throne. "Very well," Hades says. "I accept. Draw up the final binding legal documentation and ensure that the lunar South Pole crater zone remains perpetually free of any surface obstructions from, say, errant titans or overly enthusiastic constellations." Hermes, managing to look both professional and utterly thrilled, quickly exchanges the beautifully printed certificate for the heavy ingot. He thanks his uncle politely and begins his rapid ascent. As you leave the oppressive gloom, you realize the scam has just reached its high water mark. If Hermes can convince the literal god of the dead to buy a piece of intangible light, the perceived value of the moon certificate is now irrefutable. Hades' investment acts as an implicit divine endorsement for the entire scheme. Hermes has successfully inserted his fractionalized moon asset into the highest echelons of the celestial economy.
With the massive electrum ingot from Hades secured in his satchel, Hermes has officially turned the intangible into extreme liquid wealth. The momentum of the celestial hustle is immense, but now comes the most boring and critical phase: protecting himself. You watch as Hermes returns to his quiet pavilion on Olympus, the one dedicated to efficient transaction flow, to tackle the fine print and caveats. Hermes knows that while lesser deities might be easily charmed, the greater Olympians, if they ever bothered to check, would immediately see the impossibility of the contract. How exactly do you deliver a piece of the moon? And what happens if the purchaser decides they don't like the cloud cover? He pulls out the bronze tablet, which now feels heavier, weighted down by the financial commitments he's made. He needs to invent complex, legally dubious clauses to handle the impossibility of delivering the moon. This is where he earns his title as the god of rhetoric, transforming non-delivery into a feature. He begins scribbling in the minutiae section of the certificate. He is promising only viewing rights and aesthetic dividends, meticulously defining what these non-physical terms mean. Viewing rights, defined as the statistically average, unclouded terrestrial visibility of the assigned lunar share from the purchaser's primary divine residence, calculated on a non-pro rata basis across a 20-year cycle. Translation: if it's cloudy, that's your problem, not mine. Aesthetic dividends, defined as the implied, non-transferable social and psychological benefit derived from the knowledge of owning a celestial asset. Translation: you paid for bragging rights, nothing more. He spends an immense amount of time crafting the atmospheric interference clause. This is the light joke for this segment. If a mortal city-state builds a particularly tall temple or insists on a smoky sacrifice directly between the purchaser and the moon, Hermes murmurs, the resulting obstruction shall be considered an act of Zeus, and the contract holder shall have no recourse or claim against the vendor. Always blame Zeus. He's usually napping anyway. This level of administrative detail is so dense and continuous that it is genuinely sleep-inducing. Hermes is performing the most complex form of cosmic paperwork ever conceived, ensuring that every loophole is sealed against the possibility of having to give the electrum back. You note a quirky tidbit about ancient Greek contracts. Many legal agreements, especially those related to loans or trade, included elaborate curses against the party who broke the terms, often calling upon the Furies or the chthonic gods. Hermes decides to include a similar clause in his fine print, ensuring that any god who attempts to sue him for breach of contract will suffer from mild, persistent sandal chafing for one full mortal decade. He has to address the issue of physical access. He writes a clause stating that the certificate explicitly forbids any attempt by the purchaser or their agents to physically land on or otherwise interfere with the designated lunar share. This not only protects Selene's operational stability, but also prevents a disgruntled god from realizing that the Moon's South Pole crater zone is just a patch of dusty rock. One mainstream historical fact that Hermes is subtly mimicking is the development of private property rights in early Greek city-states. While land ownership was generally straightforward, the concept of owning resources above the land, like water rights or in this case light rights, evolved gradually and was often highly contested. Hermes is simply shortcutting millennia of legal evolution into one confusing document. He has now converted the perceived value, the moon is beautiful, into legal certainty. Hermes is not liable. The only remaining risk is the regulatory risk, specifically one god who actually oversees the sun, the moon, and generally cares about celestial order, Apollo.
Historians still argue whether Hermes' trickery was ultimately constructive, leading to new forms of trade and communication, or purely chaotic. In this moment, creating an ironclad legal defense for a baseless scam, he's appearing to be constructively chaotic. He's building a financial structure that is legally sound, even if ethically bankrupt. He stacks the finished certificates, each one a masterpiece of misleading calligraphy, into his satchel. He needs one more section of the fine print, a clause about divine interference. He simply writes, "All transactions are final and guaranteed under the patronage of Hermes, god of commerce, and are therefore inherently correct." The arrogance is breathtaking, but the delivery is subdued and utterly professional. He gathers his composure. The financial structure is sound. The customer base is eager. The only thing that could stop this is a direct, higher-level intervention. And just as he thinks that, he feels a slight warming tremor in the air, not thunder, but a very firm golden resonance. Apollo has woken up.
The moment Hermes feels that subtle warming tremor in the air, he knows the low-risk phase of his operation is over. That golden resonance isn't thunder. It's the signature hum of a very powerful, very organized entity who has just finished his morning routine and noticed something irregular in the sky. This is where Apollo intervenes. Sort of. Apollo, god of the sun, music, prophecy, and order, all things Hermes in his current state is actively undermining, is Selene's twin brother. While Selene is too tired to care about abstract finance, Apollo is pathologically concerned with celestial aesthetics and regulatory precision. His entire domain revolves around predictable, beautiful, and most importantly, free light. The idea of someone fractionalizing and selling off his sister's output for profit is to him the ultimate breach of cosmic etiquette. You see Apollo arrive on Olympus not in his blazing sun chariot, but on foot, gliding with that infuriatingly perfect golden ratio symmetry. His aura is warm, but his expression is one of icy disapproval. He doesn't rage, he gets bureaucratic. Hermes, seeing Apollo approach, adopts an expression of serene, almost childlike innocence. He leans back against a column, pulling out a sheaf of blank papyrus, pretending to be immensely busy with his messenger duties. Apollo stops directly in front of him. His voice is calm, clear, and perfectly modulated, the voice of a god who has spent millennia practicing public speaking. "Hermes, I have received some concerning whispers regarding the monetization of Selene's reflected output." Hermes sighs dramatically. "Ah, the rumors. They are so hard to control, aren't they, Apollo? I'm just trying to introduce fiscal liquidity to an under-leveraged celestial asset, standard commerce." Apollo cuts him off, pulling a scroll from his robes, a truly massive scroll rolled in gold leaf and tied with a thick, ominous ribbon of solidified solar flare. This is not a letter. This is a divine cease and desist scroll. "This document," Apollo states, unrolling it with a sharp snap, "states in no uncertain terms that the moon, as a vital component of the celestial mechanics and a family asset, is not subject to fractionalization or commercial alienation. The light is public domain, Hermes. You are selling air." Hermes listens politely, nodding. This is the light joke for this segment. "Selling air, Apollo? That's what you call it. I call it premium atmospheric asset relocation and transfer rights. It's all about the branding, my brother. And have you seen the profit margins?"
Apollo ignores the joke. He points to a paragraph on the scroll written in blindingly bright legalistic script. This is the section detailing the Apolline decree of perpetual celestial free access. The document is legally sound and backed by the authority of the sun itself. One mainstream historical fact that makes this situation tense is the historical tension between the Greek concept of private property, ktema, and public or sacred property, hiera or demosia. Apollo is arguing the moon is hiera, sacred and public, while Hermes is asserting that the light is a separable commercial asset, ktema. This conflict is foundational to ancient law. Hermes studies the scroll, not challenging its authority, but looking for loopholes in its delivery. A very thorough decree, Apollo, but I must ask, has this been filed with the Olympian Registry of Deeds and the Underworld's Title Office? Because my clients, including Hades, require full chain of custody documentation on regulatory changes. Apollo, infuriated by the sheer administrative complexity, stammers slightly. Well, no, it was just issued. I came directly here to intercept you. Hermes sighs dramatically. Ah, the rumors. They are so hard to control, aren't they, Apollo? I'm just trying to introduce fiscal liquidity to an under-leveraged celestial asset, standard commerce. This is the ultimate stall tactic. He has turned his own illegal paperwork into a temporary shield. He knows that the time it takes Apollo to navigate the divine bureaucracy to make the decree enforceable is the exact amount of time he needs to sell the final shares and maximize profits. You recognize a quirky tidbit about the early Greek bureaucracy. The official recording of decrees on stone stellae was a lengthy, meticulous, and expensive process designed to ensure permanence, but which also created massive delays. Apollo, the god of rapid movement, via his sun chariot, is now forced to contend with the slow, grinding pace of paperwork, which is Hermes' true domain. Historians still argue whether the Greek mythological obsession with trickery and deception, like the dolos employed by Hermes, was a reflection of genuine commercial anxieties in competitive trading ports, or simply an enduring celebration of cleverness. Watching Hermes evade the ultimate celestial regulator with sheer paper-pushing, you tend toward the latter. Apollo, realizing he has been administratively outmaneuvered, lets out a sigh of pure golden frustration. He folds the scroll back up, the light in the chamber dimming slightly. He issues a final, unenforceable threat. You will regret this, Hermes. Zeus will hear of this audacity. Hermes smiles gently, his voice maintaining that low, smooth, soporific quality. I'm sure he will, brother, but right now the market is hot, and I have customers waiting. Apollo strides away, heading straight for the Olympian filing office, a place notorious for its slow, agonizing pace, to begin the laborious process of stamping and registering his decree. The distraction is complete. Hermes has bought himself time. The next logical step before the decree becomes active is to push the sales frenzy to its absolute maximum. The bubble is ready to burst, but not before one last massive acquisition of wealth.
The subtle annoyance of Apollo has merely fueled Hermes' fire. The clock is ticking, and the grace period afforded by celestial bureaucracy is short. You are now witnessing the Scam Peaks Celestial IPO. Hermes knows he has maybe one mortal day, or perhaps 3 Olympian hours before Apollo's cease and desist scroll is officially filed and enforceable. He must liquidate the remaining moon certificates now. He returns to the most public space in Olympus,
the grand marketplace, which is now thronged with minor deities, heroes' shades, and wealthy mortals who have achieved immortality through exceptional service or a very good lawyer. The air is thick with a financial frenzy driven entirely by the rumors spread by the Ore and the confirmed buy-in from Hades. If the god of the underworld is investing in lunar illumination, it must be the safest, quietest investment available. Hermes stations himself on a slightly elevated marble plinth, looking less like a huckster and more like a sleepy, incredibly calm investment banker. He doesn't need to speak loudly. The sheer FOMO, or fear of missing out, is doing the heavy lifting. He pulls out the final, highly desirable certificates. These are the premium shares, reserved for the final push. Share 2, the Lunar North Pole Perpetual Twilight Access. Share 15, the New Moon Phase Revenue Stream. The most complex, promising returns based on the absence of light, a true testament to abstract finance. The crowd around him is in a panic-buying frenzy. They are throwing gold coins, priceless antique artifacts, and even favors they owe to major gods onto the plinth. They don't care what they're buying. They only care that it is scarce, Hermes approved, and going fast. You see a minor river nymph who manages a particularly slow tributary in Boeotia, trading an ornate gem-encrusted urn which holds her entire life savings for a piece of the new moon phase revenue stream. She doesn't understand the contract, but she's euphoric. This is the light joke for this segment. Hermes accepts a payment from a satyr who offers a pouch of very old, slightly fermented grapes. Hermes politely returns the grapes, saying, "I appreciate the dividends, sir, but we're only accepting liquid, non-edible assets at this phase. Standard market practice." The chaos of divine finance is surprisingly loud, but the sheer predictability of human and demigod greed is lulling. You are watching a purely psychological economic event. The value of the moon certificate is now based only on the price the last person paid. You are witnessing a demonstration of a quirky tidbit from ancient Greek culture, the common use of votive offerings to the gods, where the gift's value was not just monetary but symbolic. By paying Hermes, these lesser deities are not just investing, they are making a public, high-status offering that signals their wealth and ambition. The certificate itself is the ultimate votive offering. Hermes handles the transactions with his usual, soft-spoken efficiency. His demeanor never changes from that of a bored but professional administrator. He is merely filling out forms, transferring certificates, and managing the deluge of wealth flowing into his massive satchel of holding, which, you remember from Section 1, can hold a surprising amount of stuff. One mainstream historical fact that makes this moment resonate is the existence of the Delian League treasury in 5th century Athens. Originally intended as a defense fund, it quickly became an investment pool and a symbol of Athenian dominance and financial power. Hermes, by centralizing celestial wealth via his scam, is performing a hyper-accelerated version of this historical financial consolidation. The final, most expensive share, the Lunar North Pole Perpetual Twilight Access, is snapped up by a wealthy demigod of architecture who wants the guaranteed, consistent, non-glare light for sketching massive new temple designs. He pays in a solid, meter-tall statue of pure hammered gold. Hermes accepts the gold with a quiet thank you, and with that, the last of the 16 fractional shares is sold. The entire moon, or at least the aesthetic viewing rights to it, has been sold in what feels like an hour. Historians still argue whether the purpose of the mythical god of commerce was to facilitate trade or merely to celebrate the cunning required to win in the marketplace. For Hermes, standing atop his pile of gold and electrum, the distinction is meaningless. The market has spoken. He smiles, a tiny, almost imperceptible turn of the lip. He glances towards the main Olympian hall, where he knows Apollo is currently waiting for a clerk to laminate his regulatory decree. It is at this exact moment, the peak of the hustle, the moment of maximum profit and minimum remaining risk, that a truly earth-shattering sound begins to happen. It is not a financial sound. It is a snore. A deep, thunderous, millennia-old snore that suddenly stops. The entire market falls silent. Every deity, every hero, every nymph freezes. They all know the source. The king of the gods has woken up. The sudden silence that follows the abrupt cessation of the thunderous snore is heavier and more pervasive than any noise. Every deity, nymph, and wealthy shade in the Olympian marketplace freezes, every single one of them. Even the tireless Oreys cease their whispering. This is the sound of Zeus's nap is interrupted. Zeus, the king of the gods, is notorious for his long, deep slumbers, often lasting centuries. When he sleeps, the universe runs on autopilot, often guided by Ares, who likes fighting, or Hera, who likes schemes. When he wakes, it means something major has happened. And the thing that woke him was the sheer volume of commerce, specifically the chaotic noise of thousands of gold coins being exchanged for a non-existent celestial deed, amplified by the financial panic of a speculative bubble. You watch, holding your breath, even though you don't need to breathe, as the massive, ornate bronze doors of the main hall shudder open. Zeus emerges, not in a rush, but with the slow, terrifying momentum of a planet shifting on its axis. He is gargantuan, draped in robes woven from thunderclouds, and he looks profoundly annoyed. His voice, when it finally comes, is not a roar, but a low, amplified grumble, like the deep bass sound before an earthquake. What in the name of the primordial void is all this commerce? He glances over the marketplace. His eyes, usually flickering with electricity, focus slowly on two things: the immense pile of gold and electrum next to Hermes, and the bewildered, panic-stricken faces of the investors holding their flimsy, beautifully inscribed moon certificates. Hermes, the god of cunning, is finally forced to drop the pretense of the sleepy banker. He stands up straight, placing one hand protectively on his satchel of holding. Father, I was simply performing a divine financial optimization service. I introduced liquidity to the lunar viewing market. It's an innovative... Silence, Zeus booms. The word is not shouted, it is merely stated, and it vibrates through the very foundations of Olympus, causing small, non-essential columns to crumble into dust. This is the ultimate regulatory risk that Hermes factored into his fine print. Remember that low to moderate risk rating from Section 3? He guessed wrong. Zeus points a massive finger at the moon certificate clutched by the river nymph. He reads the fine print, effortlessly, without moving the scroll, aloud, his voice mimicking Hermes' soft sales pitch. Aesthetic dividends are non-fungible, excluding physical visitation rights. Hermes, you are selling the reflection of a light source that is already universally available and sacred. He pulls out a document, not a scroll, but a sheet of solidified lightning, which serves as the supreme deed of Olympian governance. He doesn't even need to write on it. He merely taps it. This is the light joke for this segment. Zeus looks at Hermes with utter disbelief. You know, I once invented a type of cloud that rained only slightly warmed olive oil, but even I wasn't audacious enough to charge for it. This is not innovation, Hermes. This is a celestial HOA scam. One mainstream historical fact that Zeus is enforcing is the concept of Themis, divine, fixed law and custom. The cosmos is governed by a divine order that is considered immutable. The moon, the sun, and the ocean are primal, sacred goods that cannot be parceled out for personal profit, regardless of how clever the contract is. Zeus's authority is absolute Themis. Zeus looks at the panic-stricken crowd, and you see a flash of genuine royal concern. He cannot allow his own minor deities to be financially ruined by his son. That would cause massive, irreversible paperwork for centuries. He addresses the crowd, his voice now slightly softer but still rumbling. The moon is not a commodity. It is inalienable public domain. I hereby decree, with the full force of this lightning, that all sales of lunar viewing rights are null and void. A collective, massive sigh of relief and disappointment washes over the marketplace. The bubble has burst, not with a pop, but with a divine judicial ruling. You observe a quirky tidbit about Zeus's intervention. He never actually refers to Apollo or the cease and desist scroll. Zeus operates entirely above the bureaucratic layer. Apollo's careful legalistic filing process was completely irrelevant. Zeus simply decreed the contract invalid by virtue of his supremacy. Historians still argue whether the ultimate source of law in early Greek society was democratic consensus or the arbitrary will of a powerful ruling family. Here, on Olympus, the answer is definitively the latter. The supreme ruler's will immediately overwrites even the most cleverly worded contracts. Zeus turns his attention back to Hermes, who looks very small and very rich. You will return every coin, every ingot, every artifact to its owner, starting now. This market manipulation is over. The king of the gods points his finger at the colossal pile of gold and electrum next to Hermes. A bolt of soft, focused light descends and transforms the entire pile of gold and electrum not into dust, but into a mountain of precisely organized, meticulously catalogued receipts. Hermes' punishment is clear. He doesn't lose the wealth to a fine. He loses it to the administrative nightmare of returning it all. The god of commerce will now become the god of refund accounting.
The vast marketplace, moments ago a center of high-stakes celestial finance, is now utterly silent, draped in the thunderous presence of the awakened king of the gods. You watch as Zeus, having decreed the moon inalienable public domain, issues the final crushing blow in the divine regulatory crackdown. The pile of electrum, gold, and priceless artifacts has been transmuted into an equally massive shimmering stack of detailed cross-pantheon refund receipts. This is Hermes' true punishment, not loss of status, but the soul-crushing burden of divine accounting. Zeus, still radiating massive but now controlled power, issues the formal decree, his words slow and measured. The celestial sphere and all its components, sun, moon, and stars, are sacred trusts, managed by the ruling Olympians for the benefit of the cosmos. No fractionalization, monetization, or sale of aesthetic viewing rights is permitted. He glares at the still frozen crowd of minor investors. Return to your posts. Your money is safe, but your trust in reckless entrepreneurial schemes is hereby revoked. The order is absolute. The deities, relieved not to have lost their life savings, but embarrassed by their gullibility, begin to disperse quietly, their flimsy moon certificates now just pretty pieces of scrap paper. Hermes, looking at the monumental stack of receipts, lets out a small, quiet, profoundly weary sigh. The fun is over.
The challenge now is the paperwork. This is the light joke for this segment. Hermes manages a tired smile. Well, Father, at least you invented a highly efficient receipt generation system. Could you perhaps also invent a self-sorting nymph? Because I'm going to need one. Zeus ignores him. Zeus, before returning to his interrupted nap, issues a final, specific directive to his son. Hermes, you will personally oversee every refund. Every single one must be delivered to its original location, and you will not use your winged sandals for rapid transport. You will use a celestial donkey cart, and you will deliver them at the speed of a tax assessment. The true genius of Zeus's punishment is its boring, tedious nature. He is forcing the god of speed and cunning to be slowed down and weighed down by the sheer volume of his own complexity. You notice a quirky tidbit about the divine accounting. Every single receipt is not just itemized by asset and value, but also includes a tiny glowing signature from Hades acknowledging the return of the electrum ingot. Hermes is forced to deal with the only gods whose paperwork is more terrifying than his own. One mainstream historical fact that Zeus is upholding is the role of the polis, city-state, in controlling vital common resources, often represented by the sacred groves or public water sources. By declaring the moon inalienable public domain, Zeus is asserting the ultimate divine polis has the final say over communal, sacred resources, overriding individual commerce. Historians still argue whether the concept of justice in Greek mythology was about restoring moral balance, dike, or simply asserting the hierarchy of power. In this case, it's a perfect blend. The hierarchy is asserted, Zeus wins, and the balance is restored. The funds are returned. Zeus turns, and with a final echoing sigh that sounds like a strong wind over a massive mountain range, he returns to his hall. The bronze doors close with a heavy, final thud. Hermes is left alone with his giant cart, his winged sandals forbidden, and the mountain of receipts shimmering under the cold Olympian light. The biggest, most profitable scam in celestial history has dissolved into the biggest, most boring administrative headache. He pulls the first receipt, a complex form detailing the refund of 3 copper coins to a shepherd in the Peloponnese. Poor, confused Therses, remember him from Section 4, is about to get his coppers back, delivered very, very slowly. The long, dull process of divine rectification has begun.
You stand beside Hermes, the immense weight of the administrative task settling over the quiet Olympian marketplace. The excitement of the hustle is gone, replaced by the profound tedium of the accounting nightmare. The god of cunning, speed, and thieves is now reduced to the cosmic equivalent of a chief financial officer handling a massive, fraudulent corporate bankruptcy. Hermes sits down on a marble bench, the celestial donkey cart tethered nearby, a slow, patient, and utterly humiliating means of divine transport. He pulls the receipts toward him, a shimmering mountain of paper that represents every transaction, every customer, and every penny, or electrum ingot, he needs to refund. He starts with the easiest ones, the high-value, simple asset transactions. The electrum ingot paid by Hades, remember that one from Section 8, is the first to be sorted. Hermes meticulously checks the receipt, which notes the ingot's specific gravity and elemental purity. He packs the ingot back into a small, lead-lined box. Underworld assets are notoriously fussy about being returned, and affixes the receipt. That's one down, but that single transaction took him nearly an hour of meticulous verification. He then moves on to the bulk of the sales, the minor deities and nymphs who paid in gold coins and celestial favors. He is forced to confront the colossal cross-pantheon headache of divinely mandated refunds,
Every gold coin must be verified for its Olympian purity. Every favor, like the promise of better dew for a field in Thessaly, must be formally rescinded with a signed, notarized document. You observe the meticulous nature of the god of commerce when he is forced to be honest. He's realizing the administrative burden of his scheme was the true punishment. Building the scam was quick and fun. Dismantling it is slow, agonizing, and devoid of glory. The energy of the rush is replaced by a profound, hypnotic exhaustion. This is the light joke for this segment. Hermes finds a receipt for payment made in 3 very rare but slightly bruised golden apples. He sighs. Seriously? Fungible fruit? Who signed this one? Oh, right, I did. I really need to stop accepting produce as collateral. He has to fill out an entire 3-page form detailing the depreciation of the apples. One mainstream historical fact that makes this scenario feel accurate is the complexity of ancient Greek coinage. Different city-states had different weights and purity standards for their coins, like the famous Athenian owl coin. Hermes, the god of coinage, now has to deal with the cosmic equivalent, the varying purity of wealth from different divine domains, making his refund process a logistical nightmare. He pulls out a large, heavy ledger, the Book of Retracted Transactions. He begins to meticulously cross-reference the original payment with the refund receipt. The continuous, soft scratching of his quill on parchment is the most soporific sound imaginable. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Every motion is precise, slow, and utterly unhurried, thanks to Zeus's anti-speed mandate. You notice a quirky tidbit about the divine receipts. On the reverse of every refund receipt is a tiny pre-printed illustration of a donkey, reminding Hermes of his current mode of transport. It's a subtle yet crushing act of divine trolling from Zeus. Historians still argue whether the complex economic regulation in ancient Greece was designed to promote social equity or primarily to centralize power within the ruling class. Watching Hermes now, it's clear that in the divine realm, regulation is a tool of supreme power, a way for Zeus to reassert the celestial hierarchy and inflict maximum bureaucratic pain on his enterprising son. He is working on the case of the demigod of architecture, who bought the last premium share. Remember the meter-tall gold statue from Section 11? Refunding the statue requires an appraisal, a structural integrity assessment, and a 4-part form detailing the non-fungibility of aesthetic gold. The paperwork is astronomical. As the morning progresses, or whatever passes for morning on Olympus, Hermes begins to look physically deflated. The boundless energy of the trickster is drained by the sheer weight of accountability. He is no longer focused on profit, he is focused on compliance. He realizes the scale of the refund process is so vast that it will take him years, mortal years, to complete, traveling across the cosmos at the speed of a very slow celestial tax collector. He is trapped in a loop of administrative penance. The moon hangs high in the day sky, a faint pale disk, utterly serene and completely out of reach. Hermes glances at it, not with greed, but with a deep, newfound weariness. The moon is beautiful, yes, but selling it was far too much work. He just wants his winged sandals and his simple, fast messenger job.
The vast, shimmering mountain of receipts has finally dwindled. Days or perhaps weeks of slow, meticulous work have passed, characterized by the monotonous sound of Hermes' quill scratching parchment and the slow, heavy hoof falls of the celestial donkey cart. You have witnessed the full, boring spectacle of the god of mischief being utterly defeated by bureaucracy. This is the stage of a return to mundane mischief. Hermes finally delivers the last refund. The 3 copper coins return to the shepherd Thyrsis in the Peloponnese. Remember him from section 4 and 13?
He hands the bewildered mortal the coins, recovers the copper certificate, and gives a weary final explanation about divine regulatory overreach. He is exhausted, humbled, and smells faintly of dust and old receipts. Returning to Olympus, Hermes goes straight to the Olympian motor pool, or in this case, the chariot and sandal storage. He hands the celestial donkey cart keys to an attendant and retrieves his own prized possessions, the winged sandals. The moment they touch his feet, you feel a surge of his true electric energy, the speed, the cunning, the sheer restless need to move. But the energy is tempered by a deep new wisdom. Planetary commerce is too much work. He settles back into his regular schedule of delivering scrolls, content that at least the postal service is less complicated than selling planets. His first assignment is mundane, delivering a new weather pattern request from Poseidon to the appropriate cloud nymph. He realizes the simple elegance of his old job. It involves speed, stealth, and simple fraud, like shaving a millimeter off the edges of the bronze coinage he manages, but it doesn't involve paperwork. He's learned that massive, audacious scams, while lucrative for a moment, result in catastrophic, agonizing, slow-motion accountability. This is the light joke for this final segment. Hermes looks at a scroll detailing a new, very complicated set of rules for the annual Olympic Games. He sighs contentedly. Now this is a manageable fraud. I can rig the wrestling matches and be done before lunch. No receipts required. You notice a profound internal shift. His current mischief will be small, focused, and fast. No more hermetic doctrine of incorporeal celestial asset fractionalization. He'll stick to stealing grapes and guiding travelers down confusing paths, the simple, elegant tricks that require cunning, not complex financial spreadsheets. One mainstream historical fact that Hermes is unconsciously embracing is the efficiency of the barter economy versus the complexity of monetized credit-based commerce. He prefers the clean, fast exchange of goods or simple cons to the slow, accountable mess of abstract finance. He is enjoying the smooth, continuous flow of the simple messenger role again. The universe is running as it should. The moon is shining, untouched, unfractionalized, and free. Historians still argue whether the gods learned genuine lessons from their failures or simply reverted to their primary nature. Watching Hermes now, he has reverted, but with a refined sense of risk. He will always be a trickster, but now he is a fiscally responsible trickster. He looks up at the sky, where the moon is just beginning its transit. Its soft, silver light is a perfect, unmonetized backdrop to the quiet chaos of the cosmos. He gives it a nod of respect, not for its beauty, but for its role in teaching him the hard, boring truth about scale and regulation. He prefers his mischief to be personal, not planetary. You, too, feel the immense weight of the bureaucracy lift. The journey through the boring, complex world of celestial finance is over. The last of the paperwork has been filed, and the god of messengers is back to his simple, easy mischief. The smooth, rhythmic glide of his winged sandals as he flies off to deliver the next innocuous scroll is the final, calming sound of order restored. The narrative fades now, my friend. The faint glimmer of Mount Olympus recedes into the deep, velvet stillness of the night. You feel the slow, heavy calm of the moon's unwavering light washing over you, no longer a commodity, but a silent, serene presence. Let the sounds of Hermes' quiet, satisfied flight carry you away, the soft whoosh of his sandals becoming a gentle, continuous whisper. There are no more contracts to read, no complex clauses about aesthetic dividends, and no more frantic trading. The market is closed. The cosmos is settled. Your mind, which has processed the heavy, dense logic of divine regulation and failed entrepreneurial schemes, is now officially too tired to think about anything but rest. Let the worries of the day, like the useless moon certificates, slip away. You don't need to chase wealth or status in the night. You only need to rest. Feel the weight of the sheets, the soft hum of the fan, or the absolute, quiet stillness surrounding you. Breathe in slowly, breathe out slowly. You're safe, you're settled. The gods have stopped counting their gold, and the moon is right where it belongs. Just drift now, letting the soft, inevitable calm pull you under. Sweet, deep sleep is waiting for you right now. End of script. Sweet dreams.